fooling yourself may be the wisest thing you can do. That sounds backwards. We spend our entire lives trying to see clearly, to cut through delusion, to separate what's real from what we wish were real. And yet, there's a strange corner of human experience where the lie you tell yourself becomes true simply because you kept telling it, where pretending long enough eventually stops being pretending. Let me introduce you to an old magician and a bowl of water with a fish in it. In the film The Prestige, two young magicians are sent to observe an elderly performer execute his signature trick. The trick itself seems almost embarrassingly simple. The old man walks onto stage, hunched and shuffling, and somehow produces a large glass bowl filled with water and a live fish out of thin air. The audience gasps. Where could he possibly have hidden something that size? One of the young magicians figures it out almost immediately. The bowl was between his legs the entire time. He was carrying it with him from the moment he stepped into view. But here's what makes the trick remarkable, and this is something we'll need to sit with for a moment before its full weight becomes clear. The magician wasn't acting hunched only during his performance. He walked that way everywhere. To the grocery store, to visit friends. Every second of every day, his back curved around an invisible bowl that he wasn't even carrying, training his body into a permanent posture of concealment, all for one simple trick. The young magician who understood this perceived it as total devotion. The words that might echo in your mind after hearing it could be something different, something like, live the magic. There's an obvious benefit to this kind of relentless practice, and it's the one most people notice first. If you are obsessively diligent when no one is watching, there's almost no mechanism that could make you suddenly become careless when eyes are on you. The performance becomes effortless because it's not really a performance anymore. The character you're playing has become the character you are. You live the magic alone in 1,000 empty rooms, and so when the spotlight finds you, there's nothing left to fake. This is the logic behind advice you've probably heard before. Practice the way you want to play. Rehearse like it's opening night. Treat every repetition as if it counts. But there's something else happening here, something less discussed, and I think it might be more important. What if the most important person being fooled by the trick is the magician himself? We'll get to it, but first we need to talk about a language problem. Here's something that might seem obvious once you hear it, yet somehow gets overlooked in almost every self-help framework ever written. Your body doesn't speak English. When you try to convince yourself of something through internal monologue, when you run motivational phrases through your head like affirmations, you're speaking a language that reaches only part of you. The conscious verbal narrative building part, the part that thinks in words. But there's another part of you, the part that regulates your sleep, that decides when you're hungry, that floods your system with fear or fatigue or restlessness. That part has been around far longer than language itself. It evolved in creatures who never had the luxury of words, and it listens to something much older. It listens to what you do. So here's where the magic trick becomes something more than a metaphor. If you find a new passion project and suddenly you're working on it 18 hours a day, surviving on 6 hours of sleep, you might expect your body to rebel, to flood you with tiredness, to plant the desperate urge for a nap in the middle of the afternoon. That's what the biology textbooks would predict. But sometimes it's the opposite. You wake up fresh, you go to bed without feeling particularly tired. Your body seems to have rewritten its own rules, and the only thing that changed was the story you were telling it through action. 18 hours a day of focused work doesn't just produce output, it produces a new internal narrative, one that says, this matters more than rest, this is what we do now. I'm not suggesting anyone should actually sleep 6 hours a night. That's a separate conversation about what's healthy versus what's possible, and they're not the same thing. But the example reveals something about the architecture of self. The body is not a fixed machine. It's a story-listening organism that rewrites its own parameters based on the patterns it observes, and you are the author of those patterns. Let me offer a different example, one that might feel more immediately applicable. Imagine a daily cold shower, not as a wellness trend, not as a biohacking protocol, but as a story you're telling your body, one turn of the knob at a time. Every morning you stand at the edge of discomfort. Your hand is on the temperature control. Your mind starts generating objections. No, that will be cold. That will be unpleasant. Don't do it. And then you turn the knob anyway. What story does that tell? What is your body learning through the language it actually understands? Perhaps something like, I don't back down from discomfort. I choose momentary difficulty for longer-term benefit. Fear of sensation doesn't control my decisions. Turn the knob enough times, and something interesting might happen. not to your circulatory system or your immune response or whatever physical benefits people claim cold showers provide. Those may or may not be real. But something happens to the voice in your head. The voice that tries to talk you out of a morning run because it's cold outside. The voice that suggests you skip the gym today because you're a little tired. The voice that recommends you delay the difficult conversation, avoid the challenging project, retreat into comfort. That voice starts running out of arguments. They become weaker. Eventually, maybe it even gives up and just goes with the story. When the diet becomes easy, when the long hours aren't exhausting, when the gym isn't a chore, because you've been telling your body a tale every single morning. The tale goes, I am someone who does hard things despite not wanting to. And after enough repetitions, the body starts to believe it. The internal resistance weakens. Not because you've become fearless, but because you've redefined what kind of story you live in. There's a kind of person who seems to move through life with less friction than the rest of us. They start diets and stick to them. They commit to exercise routines and don't abandon them after 2 weeks. They make decisions about their habits and somehow those decisions hold. What might be different about them? It could be willpower. Some people seem to have more of it for reasons we don't fully understand. It could be circumstances. Maybe their lives contain fewer obstacles and temptations. But I wonder if part of it is simply this. They've told their bodies enough consistent stories that the internal resistance has learned to be quiet. A message constantly delivered to their nervous system. This is who you are. This is what matters. This is worth the cost. Think of it like training an animal, except the animal is the ancient, wordless, instinct-driven part of yourself that existed before language. You can't negotiate with it using logic. You can't convince it with arguments. But you can show it again and again what kind of creature you are. And eventually it adjusts its expectations. The cold shower becomes just a thing you do. The early morning workout becomes just a thing you do. The discipline around food becomes just a thing you do. Not because you've conquered some great enemy, but because you've lived the story long enough that it stopped feeling like a story. You're just living now. Here's the strange part, and this is where we return to the idea of fooling yourself. In the beginning, you're pretending. You're not really the kind of person who takes cold showers. You're not really the kind of person who works 18 hours on something they believe in. You're not really the kind of person who chooses difficulty over comfort. You're just acting like that person because you've heard it's a good idea, or because you're trying an experiment, or because some part of you wants to see if it's possible. You're lying to your body about who you are. And here's where the magic happens. If you keep lying long enough, it stops being a lie. The pretense becomes the reality. The performance becomes the personality. The story you were telling becomes the truth. Not because you fooled anyone else, but because you fooled the part of yourself that needed to be convinced, the ancient, wordless, pattern-recognizing part that doesn't care what you think you are. It only cares what you do. You lived the magic, and then the magic became real. So maybe we need to revise our understanding of self-improvement, not as a battle of willpower, you against your worst impulses, not as a rational process of making better decisions through clearer thinking, but as a kind of extended magic trick where the audience is yourself. The old magician in The Prestige understood something profound. He knew that a single performance, no matter how convincing, would never be enough. The body is too smart to be fooled by occasional effort. It needs consistency, it needs repetition, it needs to see the same behavior so many times that it gives up questioning and simply accepts. Total devotion every second of every day. That might sound exhausting, it might sound like an impossible standard, and if you think of it as sacrifice, it probably is. But what if it's not a sacrifice at all? What if the hunched posture, the cold water, the long hours, the difficult choices made again and again, what if those aren't the price you pay for becoming someone new? What if they're simply the language you use to tell yourself a new story? And what if the moment you stop seeing it as effort and start seeing it as speech, the whole thing becomes lighter? There's a question embedded in everything we've been discussing, a question about identity and change, and the strange relationship between who you are and what you repeatedly do. The answer, if there is one, might be simpler than it seems. You're always telling your body a story. Every action is a sentence. Every repeated action is a paragraph. Every day is a chapter. So the question isn't whether fooling yourself works. The question is which illusion you're willing to live inside. Because we're already doing it. Everyone is running a spell. Some are just inherited, others are accidental, many are written by environments that benefit from us never noticing the script. What might change if the illusion became intentional? Not as a command, not as a life hack, but as a quiet experiment, a what if. What if consistency is not about willpower, but about narrative saturation? What if the body doesn't need to be pushed, only convinced? What if the body doesn't know the difference between a practiced lie and a lived truth? What if you believe what you made yourself believe become what you pretend to be? There's a final image that stays with me. The bowl, the fish, the slow walk, the hunched back, an entire life shaped to make a single impossible thing appear ordinary. And maybe that's the real trick, not making something appear out of nowhere, but arranging your life so thoroughly around a belief that even you forget it was ever a trick at all.